Boop a doop boop. Hey everybody, this is Kodak here. It's the middle of the night. I am in my pajamas, and let's talk about Zoids a little bit. So I put out that Zoids Chaotic Century episode out a while ago. I had to make it all fancy and sophisticated, so there were a lot of things I couldn't really cover, but it's actually been doing pretty well, and it's gotten some fantastic feedback, so I figured I'd do a little something about it here. I mean, I'd wear the sunglasses, but I think people would say that's a bit too digi-bro. But anyway, here today on the table, I have a representative of every generation of Zoids. I have the Shield Liger from Chaotic Century. I got the Liger Zero from New Century Zero. I actually have between this and the Liger Zero X's, I probably have like 4 or 5 Liger Zeros. We have the Matrix Dragon from Fuzors, which is holding on to my Game Boy Advance here. I don't know if you can see that, but currently it's on the attract mode of the game Zoids Legacy. More on that later. And we have the new Wild Liger from the Zoids Wild series, which I'll get into a little bit here. And my only Zoids Genesis toys are either broken or missing parts, so in their stead, I have a copy of Tales of Symphonia in their place. Might as well start here. A lot of people, I said that Zoids Chaotic Century is my favorite, and a lot of people felt that I was putting down the other series, New Century Zero and Zoids Genesis. A lot of people in particular said that they preferred New Century Zero to Zoids Chaotic Century, and you know what? That's fine. I think Zoids New Century Zero is also a phenomenal show. It's not like the near perfection that is Zoids Chaotic Century, but it's still really, really, really good. It still has the solid animation that I gushed over in Zoids Chaotic Century. It just is a lot more colorful. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more of the emphasis is on the action. It really, a lot of your taste on Zoids series will depend on the sort of thing that you enjoy. If you like something more Games of Thrones-ish or more like Gundam, which has like a lot of political intrigue built in with the tension and the action, then you're probably going to like Zoids Chaotic Century a lot more. If you're more of a fan of stuff like Dragon Ball or Boku no Hero Academia, where there are clear stakes going on, but that's not the main selling point of the series. The main selling point of the series is going to be like more the high-powered action and stuff like that. You're probably going to be a bigger fan of Zoids New Century Zero. There's like a really intense fight in every episode. There's a bunch of goofy characters because it's not a show about war. It does have a lot going for it. I mean, it's a bit down on the totem pole from Chaotic Century, but seeing as Chaotic Century is my #1 show, moving down from that isn't really bad. Zoids Genesis, the reason I have Tales of Symphonia here is because that's exactly how I described it in the episode. It very much feels like a late 90s to early to mid 2000s JRPG, which is where you have a colorful cast of characters who travel together to stop the army of the evil McSo-and-so. I picked Tales of Symphonia directly because it came out about the same time. It came out 2003, so it actually came out a little bit before Zoids Genesis, but Zoids Genesis borrowed a lot of design inspiration from the Tales series with the more pastel-y colored characters. Like in particular, you could probably find a version of each of these characters on the box here. I actually haven't gotten too far into Tales of Symphonia. I picked it up because it was part of the anime fandom that I was a part of in high school, so that's why I have a copy of Tales of Symphonia. I've gotten to the point where Lloyd gets the Eternal Apprentice title. Apparently the only reason I have that is because I did not know where to go and buy weapons, so I just kind of got it by being really stupid. But yeah, if you like that kind of thing, where it's that sort of adventurous series where it's more like technological high fantasy is what I call it, with the colorful characters, the very Tales of Symphonia vibe, a lot of restless teenage energy in that, then you'll probably like Zoids Genesis. Zoids Fuzors, on the other hand, is purely for people who like awesome toys, because the show itself is terrible, but it came with some of the best toys, like the Koenig Wolf, the Guy Ryuki. The Guy Ryuki I think I like more than the Matrix Dragon. The Matrix Dragon is very, very cool. It's a combination of 4 Zoid Builder characters, And there's actually a smaller combination you can do with two of the components here to make something called like the D arms dragon or something, the D arms lizard, something like that. It's like this hulking brute, and you can also make it in Zoids Legacy, which is the video game I have here. Zoids Legacy, it's a JRPG that feels a bit, it has a lot of the aesthetic of the Super Robot Wars series. It doesn't necessarily have everything. It doesn't have like the attack and counterattack system, but it does have the sort of animations. You have all these Zoids that you basically destroy sleeper Zoids to gain their data in order to be able to build your own copy of that Zoid. So it's not like a Pokeball thing where you have to like catch the Zoid. You just have to encounter it and defeat it enough times, which is a pretty cool concept. And I think you can get like a higher level one if you bring even more data. It's either that or Digimon. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, no. I remember how you do it. You discover the plans. You have to like hit them with like a special ability that makes them drop their blueprints. That's right. I was thinking of Digimon on the percentage one. It's the middle of the night, guys. But yeah, I think the other series are fine. And something interesting that people pointed out to me was the fact that New Century Zero came out in America first might have actually made Chaotic Century better. And I'm inclined to agree. You had something, lighthearted and fun that eventually turned into something more serious. And you see that happen in a lot of shows. It is a very common thing to do. And, it's one of the best ways to get a message across. So the fact that it went from like the sort of lighthearted tournament scene to the more heavier war drama actually, I think, worked in Chaotic Century's favor even better back in the day. And then there's this guy over here, Zoids Wild. You see him over here looking a bit too crisp and clean compared to what is supposed to be like the bright white Liger Zero. And this isn't yellowing from time. This is just like a weird version of the Liger Zero that came with the parts for the Schneider that has this sort of weird pearlescent cream color on the armor. It's the only one I could find all the parts for. But yeah, it's very, very different as far as model kits are concerned. I mean, you do assemble the working mechanisms, which is something that I like. I enjoy that. But at the same time, they're not on sprues. They're all in little baggies like they're Lego kits or something. It feels very sterile. It doesn't feel quite as, fun, adventurous, or nostalgic as actually breaking them off the sprues with like the original Zoids. The Zoids Wild anime, I've only managed to find up to episode 7. It's very difficult to find. There is an Asian English dub, but I've only found that up to episode 5. And it's not a robot show. It plays a lot more like a kid and his monster kind of show. It does play up the idea of a wild Zoid, which is something that has been in the show from the beginning. It is, the idea is that Zoids are actually, they're not like built from scratch robots. They are more like domesticated animals. This has been a thing from the beginning of the series. The Zoids are more like domesticated animals. They have some hints of personality, and what happened was humans eventually started strapping weapons to them and adding cockpits to them in order to take like more direct control. And that's kind of what happened. Particularly, I mean, a lot of them were made for were rigged up to be used for construction. Like there's like a little Brachiosaurus Zoid that I don't have a copy of. I think it's just called Brachios, which were originally used as like cranes, but eventually they were, of course, turned into weapons of war, kind of like what I talked about in my video. In fact, in the manga, there's a Chaotic Century manga which takes a very, very different path from what we got in the anime. Like in the manga, Van's Blade Liger eventually becomes the Liger Zero. Raven is a character from the beginning. There is no Rosso and Viola. There's no Desert Alcovolino gang. Raven is the first immediate threat who shows up that Van has to try to fight off. There's a lot of differences here. It's also, admittedly, through some stereotypical artwork that I discovered that Moonbay is supposed to be Native American. I mean, I guess my first hint should have been that her name was Moonbay. They only printed, I think, the first 13 volumes in the United States before it just kind of dropped off. It kind of dropped off soon after Van got the Liger Zero, and he actually got I think he got a red version of the Schneider armor, which was totally awesome. But anyway, moving on to Zoids Wild again. It's another series where basically, I don't know if it's supposed to be a prequel to the Zoids. I didn't watch that far. I've heard some rumors that it actually like took place on Earth, which would be very, very weird. But the idea is that originally Zoids were wild and they bonded with humans in some more, unusual forms. Like this is supposed to be the wild liger. They've actually had like things like this in the past, like the proto-saber. If you take the armor off of this guy, he kind of looks like the proto-saber, which kind of looks like the skeleton of a saber-toothed tiger, a Smilodon skeleton, the proto-saber does. It looks pretty freaking awesome, actually. But the wild liger is supposed to be like that. You attach the armor onto it. It's got these, it's actually got these kind of neat-looking, like, metallic eyes on there, and it has, like, it does have a battery-operated feature. It's a much smaller, you can see it's smaller than the other ligers I have here. It's I don't know if I'd say it's cheaper. It's clearly made out of a different quality of plastic to the stuff that you'd get off of the sprues on the traditional Zoids. But the idea is that rather than riding in a cockpit, because it's still a wild Zoid, you instead like ride on their back like they were like a horse or something. But they have this special thing called a Zoid key, which allows them to allows the pilots to turn into Sans from Undertale, and allows the Zoid they're riding to also turn into Sans from Undertale and unleash their like Wild Instinct or something, Wild Burst or something, Wild Blast. I think I can't remember what it's called, but what happens is in the case of the wild liger, it gets like these claws that come out from the top. It's like bright white like the Liger Zero, but it has like the single big overhead weapon like the Murasame Liger. It's clearly designed to invoke a lot of the older Zoid designs. And I mean, Shield Ligers have come in this primarily white color scheme as well, at least in the show. I think there was a version of the toy in Japan that also did that. But based on the first 7 episodes I've watched, it is very, very kid-oriented. It is much more like a monster show, although in this case the monsters are a lot bigger and you get to ride on them, which I think is actually pretty cool. It certainly has that going for it. It's I guess it follows the tradition that every Zoid show is a little bit different from the other ones, unless it doesn't try to be, like in the case of Zoids Fusors. They all have a different thing going for them. You have the intense war show. You have the fun, silly tournament fighter. You have the fantasy version, and then you have the one that's, sort of monster show aimed at kids. I guess I can't really fault Zoids Wild for being different. A lot of people actually seem to take issue with the fact that the Zoids, the Wild Zoids, a thing that have been a part of the series from its inception, are in fact Wild Zoids that don't have cockpits on them. And I'm like, guys, that would like being offended that Goku is an alien and has always been an alien. Well, I mean, I guess it would throw off some people, but it wouldn't throw off anybody in the United States, because we all started that with that episode with Raditz and power levels, which is why we put so much emphasis on power levels in the United States, where they won't in a place like Japan, where the whole point of the power level shtick was to prove that numbers, that nobody has power in absolutes. But yeah, let's see. I also, speaking of, basically all I said about Zoids worldwide before the 1999 relaunch was that it got more successful in Europe. I did not mention that one of the reasons it was so successful in Europe was because of the Marvel Zoids comic book. There was a comic book where instead of like being like piloted characters, all the Zoids like had personalities and could talk. I've heard it was actually really good and really fun at the time. I've never read it. All I really know about it is that like the main villain was not the Death Soarer. Like I have him hiding off to the side here. It wasn't the Death Soarer. It was the Terramander, which was sort of that weird dragon you saw in that commercial I used where he's running through space like he's Galvatron. But yeah, I have heard good things about it. I have heard that is why Zoids got a lot of success in Europe in the 1980s. There was also a line in the United States called Technozoids, which was the Zoids again, although they were like in black and white and like had laser color pegs and stuff like that. They did come out in the United States, but they were not successful. Not the way Zoids were in Europe or Japan. So a lot of people didn't really remember the Technozoids and until they came back as the Zoids for Zoids Chaotic Century. And believe it or not, on this table, this is the only Zoid I have that was from that 1983 line. Liger Zero was a new creation. The Deathsaur was from the original 1983 line as well. The Genosaur was not the Mulga, the little wormy worm, which is sort of my pet favorite Zoid. It's my favorite of the smaller, like, cute Zoids, the Mulga. I remember Zoids Battle Legends, which was another game for GameCube, which was sort of a tournament fighter. I would rig up a Mulga to go around and destroy everything. It's like the Deathsaur getting taken down by a little caterpillar. Ha ha, take that. That's like defeating Mewtwo with a Weedle. It was glorious. But I mean, if the Weedle was level 100 and Mewtwo was level 5, maybe it would be possible. But I guess that's a lot of my thoughts on Zoids. I am the kind of guy who loves building things. I create stuff when I'm, like, stressed out or bored. I like to build stuff, which is why I still have all these Zoids lying around, or all my Legos lying around. I just kind of take them out and build them for a while. I don't think I have batteries in any of these. Oh, I do in the Wild Liger. Let's see if I can remember. You actually build, whoa, the on switch for this guy. Let's let him go. Yeah, he actually, like, lowers his head, and then, like, on the third time he lowers it, yeah. So that's what it does. I'm trying to figure out if maybe I've done something wrong with the model kit, if there's a way to, like, idle it so that he doesn't, like, unleash the claws every time. I'd just like to see him, like, walk in a default mode. I think that would be fun. Hey, come back here. You're leaving the frame there, guy. But yeah, you just scratch his butt like he was a cat, and that gets him going. But yeah, it's kind of fun how that's an automatic gimmick. I do wish there was sort of an idle function to that, but I imagine that all of them do this. This is one of the mid-size kits. The large one is the Brachiosaurus. That's actually something else I didn't mention about Zoids Wild, is you can tell what each of these Wild Zoids eventually becomes in the later battle story. You can clearly see that this guy becomes, like, the Shield Liger and Liger Zero. There's another one, a really common one, that you can tell turns into the Double Sworder or the Psychurtus. There's there's a tiger that clearly becomes the Zaberfang. There is a lizard one that clearly becomes either the Genosaur or the Berserk Fury. And of course, there's the gigantic Brachiosaurus one, which becomes the Ultrasaurus or the Seismosaurus. I've actually I've seen pictures of the Ultrasaurus. I'm not sure how big it is, but the picture I've seen is it next to an Iron Kong, and an Iron Kong is actually a very, very large set, and it absolutely dwarfed that Iron Kong. I also have a Gogulus Giga. Maybe I should have built that for the show. Maybe later. Maybe if I get it by request, or if somebody, like, gifts me a copy of Zoids Battle Legend, I'll totally, like, I don't know, maybe definitely upload it, maybe even stream it or something like that. If anybody could get me a replacement copy, that would be freaking awesome. But yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on the Zoids video. I still liked it. Oh, another thing. Somebody from Zebek, Animation, actually commented on the video, and they talked about how the different organoids, the ones owned by Raven and Hiltz and Reese, their names are Shadow, Ambient, and Specula, because those were the settings they had on the shader systems that I gave so much praise for in the video. The shadow setting, the ambient lighting setting, and the specular setting for how the shaders would work. And like I said, the shaders worked really well in Zoids Chaotic Century. I actually forgot to put up examples, but I've seen, like, some in-production, like, CG work, and you can see it looks like something out of, like, the old Reboot or Beast Wars cartoons. I forgot to put any of that up. Sorry, you guys. But a shader is not to be mistaken for a texture. A texture is like a painting that you stretch over the 3D model. And, like, a texture, the best way I can say to see a texture is if you play the game Final Fantasy IX or a lot of the other, like, late PlayStation 1 games where they, like, really nailed how to get the sprite work to look good on the models, the models that the limited power of the PlayStation 1 could handle. Final Fantasy IX, I'd probably say, is the ultimate example. You can see how the characters are drawn. Final Fantasy IX, maybe Chrono Cross, or, like, Spyro 3, Mega Man Legends 2. You can see all of those. That's a texture, and you can actually see a few times in Chaotic Century where they try to use a texture to, like, show battle damage or something and try to make it look like all dirty and scuffed up. And you can tell that's when they're doing that because the model just stands out in this really ugly fashion. Whereas when they stuck to the flat colors, they looked like they were a part of the show. And that's one of the things that Zoids Fusors really failed out on. It's clear that they kept the models that Xebec created, but they did not keep the shaders, and they did not really know how to animate these models properly, because I did like a literal side-by-side of the New Century Zero running of the Liger Zero versus the Zoids Fusors running, and you can see like in the New Century Zero, it's like prancing along. It's this graceful predatory beast. It looked like something out of like that what is it, Earth 2, that nature show, something like that, like a slow motion line. Whereas in like Zoids Fusors, they're going ka-chonk, 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 ka-chonk. It's this really rough, heavy animation, and they give the footsteps sound effects that are way too loud, and it just looks so awful. It looks awful. It sounds awful, and then you have like the ones where like they like stiffly like roll over and fly through the air. Zoids Fusors basically took a massive dump on all the hard work that Xebec had done with those models, and that's one of the reasons that I particularly hold it a grudge. Although that is something that Zoids Wild seems to be doing. They do seem to be working on trying to make better CG, because that is something that Zoids is known for. It had the good CG. Transformers Energon tried to use a similar shading method. They definitely did better than Fusors, but not by much. One thing that I kind of pointed it out, but I didn't like show any good examples, is in Zoids Chaotic Century, there are parts where they actually mix in traditional animation. Like the one I used where I talked about how good it looked was when the Blade Liger gets bombed by some Redlers, but then you see the Blade Liger, it like jumps through the dust cloud, and you can actually see the dust cloud like part ways as the Blade Liger passes through it, like it's really there. That's a really cool effect. There's the instance where the Genobreaker bites the hand off of the Iron Kong, and you can see some debris, some traditionally animated debris from the Iron Kong fly by, and it helps things integrate. You got the traditionally animated water coming out the Ultrasaurus. Zoids Chaotic Century, I wouldn't say that a lot of the CG is Sakuga. Sakuga being a term for like crazy, like super like smooth and detailed animation. Like think Sasuke and Naruto fighting at the waterfall for the first time. That is considered Sakuga. I'd say there are some moments in Zoids Chaotic Century that I could consider Sakuga. The last stand of the Zaberfang is absolutely Sakuga. The way it's trying to go through Van's shield, but it's like being shredded as it does so. The way everything peels off, that looks great. And the raising of the Ultrasaurus is also definitely Sakuga. With just the water effects they have on the CG models, the way that the CG and the traditional animation is integrated is something worthy of study. It's something that people can stand to learn from. I notice a lot of people filled in the blank of insert modern anime here with 2016 Berserk. That's definitely an example I would use. A lot of shows I notice these days, they also clearly trace over like computer generated models, and it doesn't quite look right in a lot of cases. The Fate movie, the first Heaven's Feel movie, the Lancer versus Assassin chase, which I definitely consider Sakuga. There's a scene where Lancer runs along the highway to chase after a truck, and you can tell that they were just kind of tracing over computer models. It looks kind of funny. A lot of the things that happen in the Broly movie, as fun as that movie is, a lot of it reminded me of stuff that came from Dragon Ball Fighter Z. A lot of it, I'd swear, literally was made with the models from Dragon Ball Fighter Z. So it's a process that I guess people have to relearn, even though Xebec Animation totally nailed it back in 1999. We're gonna party like it's 1999, and we're gonna animate like it's 1989. Actually, it would be cool if we could animate like 1989, because back in the 80s, all the animation, they actually had the booming economy to pay for all of that crazy animation, so that would actually have been an improvement. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Zoids. If you have any more questions on my thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you've got another series that you've maybe seen me feature on the couch that you'd like to hear me talk about, by all means, hit me up. Anyway, until next time, this is Kodak signing off. I need to go to bed.